the ledger that outlived the crown. Long after the crown fell, after banners were burned and seals shattered, one object remained in use. Not a weapon, not a law, a ledger, quietly opened each morning, still trusted when rulers were not. To understand why this ledger mattered, we must return to a Europe where authority was assumed to be permanent. Kings ruled by divine right. Borders were enforced by force. Yet beneath that visible power, something far more fragile held society together. Agreement, trade needed memory, debt needed continuity, and promises needed to survive whoever sat on the throne. The first reveal begins inside merchant houses that operated across generations. These ledgers recorded obligations that outlived wars, reigns, and dynasties. Names were crossed out, symbols changed, but balances carried forward. What mattered was not who ruled, but who remembered. The ledger became a shared memory stronger than any decree. The second beat follows the moment collapse arrived. When the crown fell, courts closed and taxes stopped. Authority fractured overnight, but trade resumed within days. Merchants reopened books using the same entries they had always trusted. Credit was extended not because the state guaranteed it, but because history did. The ledger did not ask who was in power. It only asked what was owed. Slowly, something profound became clear. The real architecture of order had never lived in palaces. It lived in records, in consistency, in systems designed to endure disruption rather than deny it. While rulers competed for legitimacy, the ledger offered continuity, and in doing so, it revealed a truth that power would struggle to accept. Governments may fall, but systems that remember rarely do. As the reveal deepened, historians later realized why the ledger survived when authority did not. It was never owned by a single ruler. It belonged to a network. Copies existed in multiple cities, maintained by families whose reputation depended on accuracy. No single fire, raid, or decree could erase it entirely. Memory was distributed, not centralized. The conflict emerged when new rulers attempted to assert control. Claimants to the throne demanded access to the books, believing that whoever controlled the ledger controlled the economy. Some ordered entries rewritten. Others attempted confiscation. But each effort met resistance, not through rebellion, but through withdrawal. Merchants simply stopped using the seized records and relied on parallel copies elsewhere. Control failed because participation could not be forced. The ledger's power lay in its neutrality. It recorded obligations without judgment, ideology, or allegiance. It did not care who ruled, only that entries matched reality. When authority tried to bend it, trust shifted away. When authority respected it, commerce flowed back. Over time, rulers learned that influence came not from owning the ledger, but from aligning with it. The buildup intensified as courts reopened and states reformed. Legal systems began referencing ledger practices rather than inventing new ones. Concept of contract law, interest, and liability were formalized based on habits merchants had already refined. What began as private record-keeping quietly became public foundation. By the time stability returned, the transformation was complete. The ledger had outlived the crown not by opposing it, but by making itself indispensable. It had shaped governance from below, embedding continuity into systems that claimed authority from above. And in that quiet endurance, it exposed a paradox at the heart of power. Those who rule the longest are often those who never rule at all. The tension reached its peak when the ledger's influence became undeniable. New regimes issued proclamations, but merchants waited for confirmation in the books before acting. Taxes were announced, yet payments followed ledger conventions rather than official calendars. Authority spoke loudly. The ledger answered softly and was obeyed. The conflict sharpened as rulers attempted integration instead of domination. They invited ledger keepers into advisory roles, hoping proximity would grant control. Titles were offered, privileges granted, some accepted, believing cooperation would preserve stability. Others refused, understanding that independence was a source of trust. The ledger's credibility depended on distance from power, not closeness to it. The buildup intensified when disputes reached moments of crisis. Two cities claimed the same debt under different authorities. Armies stood ready, but merchants compared records and reached settlement without violence. Goods moved, accounts balanced. War was avoided not through diplomacy, but through accounting. The ledger had resolved what politics could not. Over time, this quiet authority reshaped institutions. Courts began deferring to documented practice. Contracts referenced ledger standards explicitly. Even states adopted record systems modeled after merchant books, embedding continuity into governance. What was once private infrastructure became public necessity. The realization unsettled those who governed. Power had always been visible: thrones, laws, force. But here was something invisible that outlasted all three. A system that did not command, yet organized society more reliably than decree. Stability did not come from domination. It came from memory that could not be erased. By this stage, the ledger was no longer just a tool. It was an anchor, a reference point that survived upheaval precisely because it was built to expect it. And in that expectation lay its greatest strength. The crown ruled in moments. The ledger ruled in time. The reckoning came not with confrontation, but with recognition. Rulers eventually accepted what resistance had proven impossible to deny. The ledger could not be conquered because it did not compete for power. It waited, and power, sooner or later, always came to depend on it. The climax unfolded when new governments formalized systems modeled directly on the ledger's logic. Ministries adopted standardized records. Public debt was tracked with the same discipline merchants had used for generations. Transparency became policy not out of idealism, but necessity. Without shared memory, authority dissolved. With it, governance could endure change. The resolution reshaped how Europe understood order itself. Stability no longer meant permanence of rulers, but continuity of systems. Laws could change, borders could shift, leadership could fall, yet obligations persisted, carried forward by records that remembered what politics forgot. The ledger had not replaced the crown. It had revealed what truly outlived it. This story leaves behind a quiet but unsettling lesson. The most powerful structures are rarely visible. They do not announce themselves. They do not demand loyalty. They simply continue working when everything else fails. Long after crowns crumble and slogans fade, order survives where memory survives. Subscribe to join the journey. The